that Rob made for you all at the end, so you can have access to the slides, and we'll also be sure to email them around. So we'll make sure you guys have all the materials that we have tonight after we're done. Real quick, we just wanted to get a sense of who is in the room tonight with us. You know, beyond just in the chat. So I think Manira is going to put a little poll up that you can answer. We were curious, one, like, what's your experience with LittleSis power research trainings? Are you new to it? Have you attended them before? What brings you to this training series? And then also what issues you work on. What movements are represented here tonight? Well, everyone, this is very satisfying to see. Okay. Cool. Awesome. So this gives us a sense of who's here. It looks like a lot of people are new to LittleSis trainings, which is great. Welcome. And we've got a pretty even mix of people who are campaigners or organizers with less research experience and want to learn more about those skills to support their work. There's some researchers here. Welcome. And some people are here because they're curious. And it looks like we also have a representation from a bunch of different movements: housing tenant organizing, climate justice, economic justice, gender and reproductive justice, folks working on Palestine. Cool. Well, welcome everyone. And we're really glad that you are here. Rob, if you want to go to the next slide, I'm just going to let folks know kind of what to expect this evening. Like I said, we're going to go for like an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. We're going to do welcome and introductions, which is what we're doing now. And then we're really going to jump into what is power research. That's kind of how we describe the work we do at LittleSis. So we want to make sure everyone's on the same page about what that actually means, how we think about that, and kind of what we see as the role of power research in social movement contexts and in campaigning contexts. And then we're also going to do some digging into how power research can be used in campaigns and movement building, and do some kind of case studies to get people thinking about, okay, what would it look like to apply this kind of research and this kind of framework to work you're already doing, work that you're thinking about doing, work that you're in the planning stages of. What can it really look like in practice? And I think one thing that I wanted to just make sure folks have in mind is this is the first in this series of trainings we're doing. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. It's also probably the most like theoretical or conceptual. We're going to focus on concepts and frameworks that are really like foundational to doing strategic power research as part of social movements. The other sessions are going to be a lot more like tools focused, and we're going to be like going through how to actually like answer particular research questions. What are all the like publicly available tools that you need to figure things out? This one's a little bit more like, okay, what's kind of like the mental framework that we use in this kind of research? So it's going to be a lot of me and Rob talking and kind of sharing conceptual stuff, but hopefully it will be kind of interesting and stimulating for people and provide a foundation to do those more like skills-based trainings later on. So we can go to the next slide, Rob. Before we start, especially since there were a lot of folks on who said that they're new to LittleSis trainings, that's awesome. What is LittleSis? We are a watchdog research organization, and we specialize in power research and mapping powerful people and organizations. So there's a team of us, including Rob, including Manira and Lauren, who are on tonight, who do that kind of research. We also train organizers and activists in how to do research like that, and kind of see ourselves as kind of like piece of movement infrastructure for campaigners who are working on corporate accountability campaigns and a lot of other different kinds of campaigns that you all named in that little poll. as a resource to you all and as a piece of infrastructure to help train, because we kind of think that we as the LittleSis crew can't do all the power research that our movements need. So that's part of what this series is hoping to do. And then we also have some particular tech tools that we're going to go into much deeper, like I was saying, in future sessions. One is LittleSis.org. That's kind of our flagship source. It is a free open source research platform. We call it like an involuntary Facebook of the 1% sometimes. It tracks relationships between powerful people, organizations, corporations, politicians. And as part of that, we have a tool that's called Holographer, which also lets you visually map, you're going to see some in this training, those relationships between powerful people and organizations and corporations. So that's what we're about. And we can go to the next slide. Like I was mentioning, kind of part of what we think the role of LittleSis is not to just do this research ourselves, but is to hopefully train and empower a bunch of you all to be able to do this research in all your different local contexts that you guys were all sharing on the chat. So part of that is this training series, Research Tools for Organizers. We're on the first one, April 18th, Intro to Power Research right now. These are free monthly training series that we're doing, that the idea is that you can either kind of like jump in and cherry pick which ones you want to be participating in, depending on what skills you're interested in, or you could do kind of the whole set of them and really kind of like build up a skill set. So you can see here, these are the ones we have coming up. Our next one is on the corporation, one on nonprofits, one on billionaires and other powerful people, and then we'll kind of dig into money in politics and researching politicians, and then local corporate power formations. So you can sign up for those at this little link here, bit.ly/research tools training, and you'll get emails and everything for the next ones. I think we can go to the next thing. Okay, so that's a little bit about who we are and kind of what we do. I think Rob and I were hoping to kind of start off the bulk of this training just defining some key concepts for people, like I said, so that we're all kind of on the same page about how we approach what the role of research is in social movements. So if people have maybe heard this phrase, power research or strategic power research before, I'm going to ask you guys to throw in the chat maybe like what comes to mind when you hear the phrase power research or strategic power research. What comes to mind? How would you define it? Power mapping, targeted intel, follow the money, power maps, who makes decisions, finding points of leverage. Awesome. Deep research on a target. Totally. All these things are exactly understanding who sets the agenda and how. Perfect. So these are all parts of what we think of as power research. We can go to the next slide, Rob. One of the things that I think is really important when we're thinking about power research, and Rob and I are going to repeat this kind of over and over again tonight and in subsequent trainings, is there's a really important difference in our minds between power research for campaigning and movement building versus like journalism or research for transparency work. And that's that when we're doing strategic power research, we don't just dig up information for the sake of having information. We want to use that information to strategically weaken corporate power. And sometimes it's like very easy when you're researching to go down a million different rabbit holes and to become really concerned with like, well, I want to know all the information. I want to like uncover and be able to explain everything, which sometimes is important, but that can also be really overwhelming and go more into the role of journalists or kind of like transparency watchdogs And we really see this as part of, like I was saying, campaigning, strategic movement building, that is part of a strategy to weaken corporate power and all the ways that it shapes our lives, and is getting in the way of the ways that our communities and ourselves want and need to live. So we wanted to just kind of define a couple of concepts. I'm sure people have other definitions that you use in your work or in your mind. But we thought it would be helpful to just kind of, again, kind of start from a place of understanding for all of us. These are from this book, Practical Radicals, which Manira, who's on, recommended to me, and I think is really helpful with this kind of thinking. And this is their definition of strategy. Because again, when we're saying power research, we mean strategic power research. You're trying to execute a strategy. And the definition that they give for strategy is a plan to achieve a goal under conditions of uncertainty with limited resources facing opposition. So that is maybe both simple and complex, but to break it down, a plan to achieve a goal, that means that people in a movement have a vision of the world as it should be. We don't just have critiques, right? But we have somewhere that we're trying to get. And some of you guys were starting to talk about those things, even in the chat tonight. And I'm sure thinking about those all the time. So we have an end goal. This idea that under conditions of uncertainty. So that means that, like, people in movements and our organizations, we don't control everything around us. We are making interventions, but we can't know everything or control everything. With limited resources. So I think we all know this, like people in movements and our organizations, we have limited time, we have limited people, we have limited money, we have limited energy. And really one of the important parts about crafting campaign and strategy is that we need to figure out how to concentrate the resources that we have to have the greatest impact. And then this last part, facing opposition, that's really going to be the bulk of what we're talking about tonight and a lot of what we do at LittleSis. There are specific people, organizations, corporations, politicians that are our opposition, that are standing in the way of our vision of what we want the world to look like. And part of campaigning and organizing strategically is to understand that opposition and understand how we can craft and carry out a strategy that beats them. So we can go to the next slide. The other kind of concept that, you know, maybe we take for granted that we all have the same definition of this or the same understanding of it, but is power. Power's part of power research. It's in the name. And when we're talking about that, what we really think of is the ability to make the world how you want it to be, even against opposition. So when we think about what power we as social movements have, what power our opposition has, this is kind of how we think about measuring it. Can we make the world we want, even against opposition? And again, there's that word opposition. There are specific people, organizations, corporations, and politicians who are opposing us, who are standing in the way of the world we want. We can go to the next slide. And I think it's helpful. A lot of times, if you're not like a full-time opposition researcher who's thinking about your opposition all the time, you're really focused probably on building our power, our organization's power, our movement's power, our neighborhood's power, our community power, and thinking about how do we build that? What does it look like? What are the models for that? And it's really important to think about that. But also, like we were just saying, in terms of strategy, we also have to think about our opposition's power. And this is, again, something from that book, Practical Radicals, that they kind of define different types of power, which I think is helpful in thinking about power research. So they say there's solidarity power, there's disruptive power, there's economic power, ideological power, political power, and military power. And in all of those categories, There,
Hey, Molly.
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. It looks like in the chat we're having a interpretation switch up.
Okay. I can pause.
I think some people are hearing Spanish when they're signed up for English and vice versa.
Okay. Let's see if we can fix that, everyone.
I'm going to end the interpretation and then try to restart it. So apologies. We'll try to get that fixed.
Hello. No, this is Anais, the interpreter. All good. It's just that Cristobal needs to switch channels. They need to go to the Spanish channel. They're in the English channel.
Got it.
Cool.
Are we all ready to go then?
Okay, cool. No worries.
Okay, thanks for bearing with us.
Thanks, everyone. So yeah, there's different types of power. That was a good reminder for me also to slow down. Apologies to our interpreters. I'll try to talk slower. There's lots of different types of power that both we and our movements have, and there's also types of power that our opposition has. So like I was saying, these are kind of the ways that that framework in Practical Radicals breaks it down. And I actually think this is helpful. Like I was saying, in doing power research, we're going to get to all the stuff that's about like, what specific databases should I use? And how do I read financial filings? And how do I look up campaign finance filings? And how do I find where a company's headquarters is and all that? But that stuff is almost like the easy part. The harder part sometimes is wrapping your head around these strategic questions and kind of this like bigger framework. And so I think that's where the next couple of slides are helpful if we want to go to the next one. In thinking about kind of big picture, how do we make the world the way we want it to see, the way we want to see it, even against opposition? Like I was saying, so there's different types of power, and this kind of helpful thing basically like has questions that when we're trying to analyze like where our movements or where our organizations kind of are at to build strategy, these are some questions we can ask to really analyze, okay, like what are the conditions that we're operating in? Which are not, sometimes are obvious and sometimes are not obvious. And so sometimes take research, whether that's internet research, talking to people you know, your experience that is research, all these things. So this little chart has like those different types of power I was just talking about, and kind of has questions to ask yourself when trying to assess what's the power that we have, what's the power that our movements have, and then what's the power that our opposition has. So just to give people a sense, for example, economic power, that is like a type of power that often we are contesting over. And there's questions about, okay, so we know our opposition has economic power. Who and how do they have that? What are the current major driving forces in the economy? Who controls what we produce? Who holds wealth? Where are their vulnerabilities in the dominant system? These are the types of questions that we think about at LittleSis when we're helping organizations build and carry out campaigns. We can go to the next one. Political power. I think this is one that people often is maybe like the first thing that comes to mind when you think of power research. Elected officials and what are the political coalitions that are in power. So who's in power across the three branches of government, you know, both federally, locally, at the state level. Given that, where can we expect contradictions, stalemates, or conflicts across branches of government? Who's the current coalition of political parties? We at LittleSis actually end up focusing a lot less on politicians, and Rob's going to talk about why that is in a minute, but it's definitely a piece of the puzzle of power research as well. And then we can go to the next one. There's also solidarity power. And I think, again, this is something that we think of a lot on our side of how do we build our solidarity power, but there also is solidarity among our opposition. And this is really a lot of what LittleSis looks at, and what this training series is going to be about is how to figure out what that solidarity power among the 1% or the ruling class, or however you want to say it, looks like. So what associations and networks do those in power have? Who are members of the ruling coalition, economic, political, military, and ideologically? What sectors, groups, or people are preventing us from making change? Where could there be divisions among those people and sectors and groups that we can kind of exploit, or drive a wedge between, to kind of diminish their power? These are all the types of questions that we think about as part of power research. And then the last one is this disruptive power, which again, I think we spend a lot of time thinking about what's our movement's disruptive power like. But the elites and our opposition are also disrupting our lives constantly all the time in ways that are very obvious and in ways that might not be so obvious, on everything from, I mean, I saw people in the chat talking about fossil fuel companies and the climate crisis, to big private equity firms like Blackstone that are buying up housing and jacking up rents and causing housing to be unaffordable, to billionaires that aren't paying their fair share in taxes, which leads to schools being defunded. So any of these issues that people are working on, there's like a process by which you can kind of go up the food chain and figure out who specifically, not just generally, but the specific people, corporations, that are causing chaos in our lives. So I think I'm going to throw it to Rob to talk a little bit more about that. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Molly. So yeah, at LittleSis, our research is really tends to hone in on what we call the power structure and the power elite, which are, you know, the actual sort of individual people who dominate the institutions that make up the power structure. And yeah, if you think back to our definition of power as, you know, the ability to make the world the way you want it to be, even against opposition, this sort of sitting, you know, all the way at the very top of the heap are the people and institutions that, you know, we refer to as the dominant power structure, and they're sort of derived from various class formations that we call the power elite. So who is this power elite? This is this is sort of it can be a bit of a tricky question to derive a real a concrete answer to, because this is sort of necessarily a somewhat squishy and nebulous category, but we can start to derive some answers to this question by asking ourselves a set of questions, and that is primarily who governs. That means who is participating in decision making, and particularly decisions that control and determine our material reality. The other big question is who benefits, and that is who is the current status quo working for, who is enjoying right now under our current conditions, who has security, who has wealth. Those people are going to be within the power elite. The third question is who wins, and that is when there is an actual fight over policy, who gets their way, again, even when they've come up against opposition. And if you look on the sort of the right side of the slide here, we have this Venn diagram, three-way Venn diagram showing sort of these interlocking and overlapping class formations. And sort of right in the middle of this, where they all come together and overlap, this is where we locate the power elite. That is the people sitting at the absolute commanding heights of politics, governance, and the economy. This diagram here comes from the sociologist G. William Domhoff in his book Who Rules America, and he really situated the power elite as coming from within the social upper class. That is your sort of your country club and private jet, private yacht type people, the corporate community, the executives and boards of the corporations that control manufacturing and distribution of goods and services, and then the policy planning network, and that is specifically these sort of extra governmental policy planning network, your elite think tanks, university institutions, places like the Council on Foreign Relations, Brookings Institution, Rand Corporation, and the really important thing to keep in mind about when we're talking about the power elite is that these people tend to occupy positions within more than one of these circles. The other thing I kind of wanted to draw your attention to here is that you very much do not see politicians labeled in this diagram. And that is because politicians sort of relate to this diagram in one of two ways. They either, come from these circles of elite power, and it is because they come from those circles that they have this track to political power, or their ability to achieve political power can be a stepping stone into these circles, whether it's through the revolving door, or getting Netflix deals after they leave office, or the ability to use this sort of governmental power in order to network and make connections with the people who really sit behind the governmental power. So why should our movements, organizations, and campaigns care about the power elite? If I guess if you have any sort of specific reactions to that, I'll let that sit there before I can get into my answer here. Feel free to drop your reactions to that in the chat. I'll let it sit for exactly one more second. And I'm going to launch into my answer to that, which is that, again, we're here with the power elite. We are talking about the power sort of behind, the face of power as we see it. That is, the people who are, creating the parameters within which, democratic decision making can even take place. The people who control the people and institutions who control energy, the roads, telecommunications platforms, manufacturing, real estate, the places where the places, the resources, the sort of the very kind of like raw materials that we all rely on to have an existence. The power elite are the sort of the people sitting at the very top of the heap that are controlling through their control of these institutions, of space, resources, homes, and jobs, are both extracting wealth from our society. We are sort of in a moment of record worldwide inequality, vast disparities in ability to live a dignified and meaningful life. But when it comes to our campaigns, one really important thing to note here is that no matter what what kind of campaign or movement we're coming from, we really tend to find that we are coming up against the same opposition. These same elites, who are busting unions, are also channeling millions of dollars unaccountably through private police foundations to police forces. They're the same people who are robo foreclosing on thousands of homes. And to sort of illustrate this, I'm showing a few maps that we've created at LittleSis that kind of show these dynamics. So on the left side of the screen, we have a map of major police foundations in U.S. cities, and showing how these enormous U.S. corporations have just financial relationships as well as governance relationships through board positions at many of these police foundations, often overlapping and interlocking. Another point here is that these elites through the sort of if you think of those three overlapping circles again, will occupy multiple positions. So as an example of this, I have a little map of Jay Johnson, the former Homeland Security Secretary under former President Obama, who is brought on to CNN as an analyst in order to sort of shape the culture, shape people's understanding of current events. At the same time, he is a partner at Paul Weiss Rifkind, a major, very important law firm. He sits on the board of directors of Lockheed Martin, an arms and weapons manufacturer that is making millions of dollars, billions of dollars off of death and industrial scale murder. He's a director of the Council of Foreign Relations, which is extremely influential over U.S. and the sort of broader Western foreign policy apparatus. He's also a trustee at Columbia University, a major Ivy League school in New York City. Again, the other map we have on here is a map of BlackRock, which is one of the largest asset managers in the United States. BlackRock is one of the top 3 shareholders in probably thousands of U.S. corporations. They also, so they are, involved in profiteering from everything from, mineral and resource extraction to, weapons in the military, banks and finance, manufacturing and retail. They also have, enjoy enormous influence within government. As we can see here, this map shows specifically connections between BlackRock and the current Biden administration. So now we're getting into actual answering the question that I think we're all here for, and that is so what do we do about this? We can understand, I think, that our conditions, the places where we live, are under the influence of an interconnected network of wealthy elites that control, again, our homes, our jobs, the physical spaces, polluting the air we breathe. So how can we go about changing that? And this is where power research comes into play. So what we believe at LittleSis is that by researching these networks of wealthy and powerful people and their organizations and institutions, following the money and really tracing and mapping their relationships to one another, we can use that knowledge and information we gain that way in order to develop these strategies for challenging that power. So what is power research? Power research is researching these networks of powerful people. And I think to put a finer point on it, we see power research as doing this research specifically in order to challenge that power, in order to reclaim some of it and bring it back to the people. Power research has a really long history. we did not invent it here at LittleSis by any means. We draw on a really robust tradition of power research in the United States. People have been doing this in the US and around the world for generations. I'm realizing I think we're a little bit behind here, so I'm going to speed through this history section a little bit, but I wanted to share this. This slide is some information from a pamphlet created by SNCC as they were challenging Jim Crow, the Jim Crow South in the United States. And SNCC had an entire research department that was that really focused on on challenging Jim Crow, not just sort of at the White Citizens Council level and at the political level in the U.S. South, but tracing the connections between Jim Crow institutions and other, possibly, on their face more liberal institutions like the New York banks, and they found and they literally traced the money and control back. Um, from pardon me, from plantation ownership to the banks in Memphis and New York, and even back to England, the colonial power that formerly claimed possession of the United States. There's a couple more examples here. I'm not going to talk through all of these, but these are different sort of applications of power research through U.S. history. One I think that's sort of extremely relevant today is right in the middle of the slide here, this Columbia's ruling elite. This was produced by Students for a Democratic Society in the late 1960s during the Columbia campus protests and occupation, which we are seeing happen again. And if you'll think back to that slide I just showed a couple seconds ago with CNN analyst and Lockheed Martin board member Jay Johnson sitting on the board of trustees of Columbia University, which is now, of course, just sick to the NYPD on student protesters who are occupying space there, protesting the university's relationship to the ongoing siege and genocide in Gaza. So, how can we use power research? It really depends on what your campaign is trying to do and what you've identified as like the most, I think, or as the strategies and tactics you're going to be using. Um, but in general, power research can be purely informative. It can give us a more accurate picture of who we're up against. It can be great for identifying specific campaignable opportunities that may not have been apparent without sort of doing this research into who is who is we are up against in our campaign. Um, it can be used to identify direct action targets that may not have been immediately apparent. um we can just use it to kind of reshape the narrative and inform the public about what is going on. It can be power research can be used to identify maybe some of the hidden villains behind environmental injustice or police brutality or any of the issues that we're campaigning around. I think one really underappreciated aspect is that through power research, we can find ways that our campaigns and movements are connected. It's we can realize through power research that maybe my housing justice campaign has an unexpected connection to and point of alliance with maybe a union campaign, for example, in the case of a landlord who may also own a restaurant or company where workers are organizing. And finally, we can use it to identify, strategic targets and points of leverage. So we build these, maps showing the connections between powerful people and organizations. And these maps show how these, relationships, whether they're business, political, or social relationships, these are all sources of power that the, current dominant power elite can draw on in order to sort of maintain their position, replicate the elite class. But all of those relationships and connections are also things that as activists and organizers, we can apply pressure to them in order to, as Molly talked about earlier, drive a wedge between particular elites, sort of play up where their interests diverge in order to sort of fracture that power, insert ourselves into the conversation. So the word has come up, the word leverage has come up, a few times here. And so when it comes to power research, here are some of the things that can provide that leverage in order to, move decision makers, mobilize the public. Again, everything aimed at drawing this power down from a class of corporate elites, to the people. Examples of hypocrisy or can be really powerful. Just sort of, again, kind of bringing transparency to a power network to show that elite interests are operating in concert, can be very useful, especially if you are working a media campaign or something like that. Following the money to following the money to show and demonstrate and learn about who political decision makers are being paid by. Just kind of digging up dirt to sort of shed negative light on a target. This is your classic kind of opposition research, or identifying conflicts of interest that can be used to potentially even change who decision makers are. If a moment is seized upon, and that information is sort of acted on in a strategic way. So that is what we're doing. What that is really what we're after is, we want to learn as much about the sort of the ruling class that we possibly can, in order to identify as many points as possible where we can start to try to strip their power away from them, draw it back down to the people, empower ourselves, our communities, our movement, and by taking that away from the people who have it, who are personally profiting from exploitation and and violence. This is now going to be a roadmap that shows really where the rest of the sessions in this series are going to go. As Molly said right at the jump, this has been sort of highly theoretical, highly conceptual session here for this first one. These next few slides, I'm going to show basically, your flow chart for, or a punch list even, for all the information that you're going to want to know. I'm not going to talk through every single one of these because I think they kind of speak for themselves. But again, every one of these flow charts here shows basically all of the stuff that we want to know, we might want to know about various people or institutions that we are interested in from a campaign perspective. The thing I really want to drive home here is that in this series, we are going to focus entirely on tools that are available online and are free to use for anybody with access to a computer or to a library. There are other tools that you can pay for, or if you are, especially if you if you belong to a union, and if you're campaigning with a union, you may have access to. But this series is really focused on free tools. So that is really, yeah, that's so everything I'm sort of talking about here is all based on free to access tools. So for a public company, we want to know about who owns them, who they're paying money to, where they get money from, who are they hiring to lobby for them, and who are they targeting with their lobbying, who are they giving money to, and then we really want to know everything we can about the business and personal relationships of the key people at those corporations. Whether that's where else they might have positions, who they socialize with. It can be great to find information about what yacht clubs or tennis clubs power elites may belong to, as well as their relationships to academia and cultural institutions. One thing we find in doing power research is that there is absolutely a sort of feeding system from elite prep schools to the Ivy League to the sort of upper echelons of power. And what we found is that elites tend to really maintain very close relationships with the universities they went to, especially again especially within the Ivy League, but that applies more broadly to other sort of elite educational institutions as well, like whether that's Stanford or Caltech or something like that as well. And all of this is really aimed at understanding who is influenced by this company and its key people, and who influences them. Moving on, this is sort of our chart for a person. This is all the stuff that I was just talking about when you're looking at, the key figures within a corporation. So we want to know about a person's business ties. Using public property databases can be really great for researching, real estate assets. That is a major place where the ultra rich park their money, and use that for whether it's extracting rent, or or money laundering, or what have you. We Through public property databases, we can find out information about what they own. We want to know about their relationships to the nonprofit world and philanthropy, and we can find that stuff through their tax filings. And then, of course, again, we want to know who the rich people are giving money to in politics, who is beholden to to your fossil fuel CEOs, your elite bankers, private equity managers, etc. The last flowchart I'm going to show is about mapping nonprofit institutions. We can find much of the same information that we can on publicly traded corporations, on nonprofits. The key difference is really the source. And I mentioned this on the last slide, but 990 filings are the tax returns filed by nonprofit organizations, and that has a whole host of information on the financial details, uh, grants that the nonprofit is making, as well as what contractors it's hiring. Nonprofits can be anything from a private college or university, to a family foundation that wealthy people use to obtain tax breaks and to fund ideological organizations that they are interested in. Nonprofits can be your chamber of commerce, basically the sort of locus of elite power at a municipal or county level. All of these things are organized as nonprofits, and they're hugely influential in our society. And we can find out, again, using free tools, a whole bunch of money about them. And then, of course, as always, we're interested in who those key people are, both the board members, the key staff, as well as the donors that are funding these nonprofits. So lastly, I'm going to talk about some examples of how power research has been put into action. This is, again, these are campaigns where power research has been used to inform strategy, and, hopefully to get some wins. So I'm throwing up this slide again that I showed earlier in this section about, how can we use power research? And the examples that I'm about to show, I think, are trying to speak to some of these use cases uh, that we're describing here. So again, we can learn more about who we're up against. We can identify campaignable opportunities, find creative direct action targets, shape the narrative and the sort of the discussion or the discourse about what we care about, find connections for our campaigns, as well as find strategic targets and points of leverage. First example I'm gonna look at, and I feel kind of funny doing this because I saw earlier when we kicked off that there was somebody from We the People Michigan working on the DTE campaign on on the webinar tonight. And so thank you so much for joining, and yeah, allow me to talk a little bit about your campaign here. But I think this is a really great example of how of using power research to shift the narrative around DTE's rate hike, and secure what at the time was, I think, a major win for Michigan consumers. So working with We the People, we co-produced a report that looked at both how DTE's activities were harming Michiganders through pollution, through poor service and disinvestment, as well as at the same time, and these are one-to-one linked with each other, extracting billions of dollars of profit out of Southeast Michigan communities, and using that money in order to buy political influence and secure power over government in Michigan. So we did a lot of deep research into DTE's political operation, their corporate filings, as well as on what they were, what the sort of real world impacts of their activities were, and published this report uh, after identifying a key campaignable opportunity, which was DTE came to the state asking to be able to extract even more money through a rate hike. Um, when corporations are asking the state for something, or asking the government for something, this is a great campaignable opportunity, because they're coming with their hand out, and this is a really excellent opportunity to push back on them, and explain why no, you shouldn't be given more money from us. And We the People did a couple really great things, again, sort of not just with this research, but by tying research to a broader organizing and mobilization strategy. First managed to win a public hearing on the rate case, which I believe was the first time in the state that this happened. And then by pushing out this research at a strategic moment and mobilizing hundreds of people to show up to this public hearing to talk in their own language about why DTE should not get this rate hike, they were able to beat back this rate hike. The Michigan utility regulator eventually granted them like 4% of what they had initially asked for. I think a really key thing to point out before I move on to the next example, though, is that these struggles are sort of constantly ongoing, and so the very next year, DTE came back and they asked for another rate hike, I think of double what they had asked for and lost on. And they were eventually, because they still even with this kind of setback, they still maintained a lot of power. This campaign had not fully sort of dismantled DTE's power, and they were able to actually at the end of the day get more money than they had initially asked for. And I don't say that, I don't stress that point to be a downer, but to make the point that this is a sort of constantly moving, constantly iterating process. And power research and organizing can be really powerful in getting these wins, but it's really through finding connections, building a broader movement, is what it takes to fully pull this power down and reimagine what provisioning energy actually looks like, whether it's through not a private corporation, but public democratic control or something like that. Next example I want to talk about is the Invest in Our New York campaign, which in 2021 got a big win in in major tax increases at the very top of the sort of income spectrum in New York State. And this has been a very long and is still an ongoing campaign, just like the DTE campaign. But again, we've found some, very, very, I think, interesting uses and creative uses of power research in order to get these wins. So, sort of early on in the campaign, we identified Andrew Cuomo, the former governor of New York, as a major obstacle to winning here. And one of the early pieces of research we did was to figure out, how much money Cuomo had gotten from billionaires in his sort of career of pursuing ever escalating heights of political power. And so we published this report, Billionaires Have Fueled Andrew Cuomo's Political Career. And then organizers with the Invest in Our New York campaign, armed with that information about Cuomo's, very close relationship to the billionaire class, they showed up at an event where he was asking for money from billionaires. Again, this is a campaignable moment where you have somebody asking for something that we can seize on, insert ourselves into the conversation, talk about what we should actually be doing, with this money that billionaires have hoarded. So organizers with the campaign showed up to Andrew Cuomo's birthday party fundraiser, which he used to hold every year. He would invite, all the New York billionaires to it. Billy Joel would come and play, and they brought Andrew Cuomo a birthday cake that had a very simple message on it: "Make billionaires pay." And this was a moment of that kind of narrative shifting, as well as finding a very interesting and appealing direct action target. The press absolutely loved it. I think every New York City newspaper had some kind of story on it. It was a very photogenic moment. And it really helped kind of kick off a broader conversation about this campaign. Another use of power research in this campaign was to beat back some of the right-wing talking points that were being deployed and that the campaigners knew were going to be deployed in an effort to raise taxes on the rich. And so we knew that that the New York politicians would say, "You're going to scare all the millionaires out of the state, and we don't want to raise taxes on New York families." And so, knowing that those lines were going to be deployed against us, we looked up and found and did using power research, again, public data. We found that last time New York had raised taxes on millionaires, the number of millionaires in the state actually grew and grew quite rapidly after that. We also published a report showing exactly how few people were going to see their taxes go up through the actual proposals in the legislature. Again, this helped sort of defuse the talking points that were being deployed against the campaign, and ultimately ended in a pretty big win. In I think they actually went into effect in 2022, the new tax rates. Last picture on here is just I really like this picture. This was from a different report we did. It shows Michael Bloomberg, and it says exactly how much richer he had gotten from the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic until that time there. And that was based on another report that we did looking at how many and how much richer all of New York's billionaires had gotten during the pandemic while everybody else was struggling. Last example I want to show is a local example from Buffalo. It's very close to my heart. And this was our nurses union, CWA, was in a contract negotiation with Catholic Health, which is one of the big one of the big hospital systems in the Buffalo area. They found that the executives at Catholic Health were not coming to the bargaining table and taking them seriously. They were not, taking patient safety and just the, necessary amount of nursing staff that needs to be in the hospital to ensure everybody is safely treated and heals, they were not taking these concerns seriously, and they were not bargaining in good faith with the union. So doing some power research, CWA looked beyond just the executives at the hospital system to the board of directors there, and they found that an executive at the grocery chain Wegmans, which is a very big deal here in Western New York. Elsewhere on the Eastern Seaboard, I understand it's also becoming they're kind of opening up everywhere. But CWA decided to start applying pressure to the board members and not just the executives at Catholic Health. And so they started going to Wegmans stores, talking to people who shop at Wegmans and who like Wegmans, and talking to them about how this Wegmans executive was not, was not bargaining in good faith with the nurses union. They actually even took this a step even farther and started talking to the executive's neighbors in his community where he lived about how he was not how Catholic Health and Keating himself were not bargaining with the union. This eventually brought the strike to a close and was marked as a win for the union because it's an example of catching elites off guard in places where they're not comfortable. One of the big things we see in so many campaigns is that elites are very used to engaging with activists, with unions, with the people broadly in places where they have the upper hand, whether it's a courtroom, a boardroom, regulatory hearings. These are places where they operate very effectively, where their clout, their degrees, their sort of connections are very valuable. So it really can be a huge benefit to our campaigns to find terrain where we can engage the same people where they do not have the upper hand and where we, in fact, have the upper hand. Doing power research can be a really great way to, again, to find those opportunities where we might have the upper hand in a confrontation with entrenched power. I think that's it for me. I think I'm going to hand it back to Molly now. I've been talking at you a whole bunch. Thank you so much for sticking with us. And I'll let you go, Molly, to talk about where we're headed next.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob. Like we've said, this was the first in a series of trainings that we're doing as part of this Research Tools for Organizers curriculum. So they're going to be every month. And the next one is going to be May 16th at the same time, 7 Eastern. And we're going to be focusing on the corporation. So that chart, that kind of flow chart that Rob showed us about how to break down the different parts of a corporation and find out kind of what all the pieces of it do and what are relationships that we can push on as organizers. That's going to be the focus of that one. So that's going to be really great. And again, it's going to be May 16th at 7. You can go to the LittleSis.org or bit.ly/research tools training and sign up for that. And we can go to the next slide. A couple other just resources. I saw people asking about resources in the chat. We'll share, like I said, these slides and stuff that we had as part of this presentation, but we also have a bunch of other stuff at LittleSis. So if you go to mapthepower.net, that's where our various research toolkits live, and that's getting really way more in the weeds in terms of what kind of research tools and strategies to use. And then next slide. Here's the slides. You can do the QR code. We'll also make sure to email it out to everyone who was on here. We're also going to email out a survey that if people want to take, that would be awesome. This is the first time we're doing this training series like this. So it's really kind of an experiment for us. And we want to make sure that we're reacting to what people's needs are, that we're focusing these on what's most interesting and helpful. So be on the lookout for that email, which will have the survey and the slides. And then if you have additional questions, for us, stuff you want to follow up on. Rob and I's email addresses are on here. You can follow us on Twitter, LittleSis. You can follow us on Instagram, LittleSisgram. We have a YouTube channel. This training will be on there. There's lots of other trainings there. And then also I'd really recommend signing up for our newsletter because we publish a bunch of research on there. So you guys will be on the list. And then last but not least, we are doing these training sessions for free, which we're really committed to doing because we know they're an important resource for all of the incredible work that you guys are all doing. But we always appreciate if people want to donate. If you donate $100, you get this incredible LittleSis hoodie that Rob was modeling for us tonight. I have one, it's very nice. So yeah, if you go to littlesis.org, donate. If you like what we're about, if you want to help support research infrastructure for our movements, we would appreciate that. And I think that's all for now. We thank you guys so much for getting on and look forward to seeing you guys at the next training.
Yes, thanks again. I'm gonna flip back a couple slides real quick just to put the QR code up one more time. But again, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Oh, I don't know if I can. There we go. There's the code. I saw somebody mentioned in the chat. I hope they haven't signed off quite yet, but there's the code. And again, the donate link is LittleSis